You're listening to Season 2 of the Mies podcast. I'm your host, Josh Sharkey, the founder and CEO of Mies, a culinary operating system for food professionals. On the show, we're going to talk to high performers in the food business, everything from chefs to CEOs, technologists, writers, investors, and more, about how they innovate and operate and how they consistently execute at a high level day after day. And I would really love it if you could drop us a 5-star review anywhere that you listen to your podcast. That could be Apple, that could be Spotify, could be Google. I'm not picky. Anywhere works, but I really appreciate the support. And as always, I hope you enjoy the show. So I'm excited to learn about you and your background. I know Culinary Agents because I've used your services in the past with my restaurants. And I think I may even have tried a few times I have a tech company now. I didn't know much of your background until this came about. And thanks to Ursula for connecting us. But you were at IBM for a long time and somehow interfacing with Netflix. Can you just tell me a little bit about your background before Culinary Agents, just so I have a sense of how the hell you got to where you are?
Yeah, I worked in food when I was younger, my first, second, third jobs, all simultaneously, in a restaurant. I was front of house. I also did serving with the catering company on the weekends. And I did that for a couple of years and I loved it and really got me into that whole excitement and grind. And
are you from New York? Or?
I am. I'm born and raised here. And my parents immigrated here from Taiwan. And so there was, and part of that whole, I would say, movement. And it was important that I got, I would say, both an education as well as a real job, quote unquote. And so while I loved the hospitality industry, it was always, understood that I was going to go do something else. The interesting thing is I was on track to be a professional musician. And I kind of had this moment and I was like, I don't want to do this. Why am I even, doing this to get into a good school that I, want to get into and then change majors. So I said, forget it. I'm just going to move back to Manhattan because I went to high school in Rockland County, which is also not upstate New York.
My family's from Rockland County, Spring Valley.
Oh, I went to Nanuet.
Yeah.
And so I went to college in Manhattan at FIT and I was working full time and going to school full time. So a double. And the interesting thing is I was trying to get into an advertising firm. And back in the day, I'm going to date myself. Back in the day, you printed out your resumes and you walked door to door, right? I remember thinking so hard about what kind of paper I wanted to print it on. And I couldn't get my foot in the door, even at an entry level position in all these major advertising firms. And, I got a temp job in the mailroom at IBM. And I was like, you know what? It fits my schedule. Let's do it. I need to pay rent. And very quickly after I started, I caught the eye of the manager of the assistants because I was, really hustling the mail and going above and beyond. And I got offered a full-time position as an assistant or a secretary, call them assistants. And I jumped at the opportunity. And what was great was I supported the advertising and digital and media group at IBM. And I got to be part of all these transformative deals that were happening with the NBA.com, PGA.com, NFL.com, and also working with the advertising firms that I ultimately wanted to go work for. And so I loved it. And I was going to school full time. And what happened was at that time, IBM came up with this idea to basically break these little startups out within the company that was funded by the company to really kind of push forward the agenda of innovation and, get in front of and work with these startups. And so I got an opportunity to jump in there because I was, working, I was always the one taking the jobs that nobody else wanted. And I was always there, first in the morning, sleeping on my desk. And I took these roles and it was great. I became a video specialist and they transferred me to Silicon Valley. I was working with Google, Yahoo, Netflix on their strategies on how to look at unstructured content, what the business models are, how you technically can do it. And I started with Netflix actually as a solution specialist. So I got brought in and I just thought it was just amazing. And when the opportunity came, I ended up taking over the relationship for IBM. So I worked with them on their transition from DVDs to digital. And it was just incredible, time.
So sorry, just I want to make sure I understand. So how is IBM, because IBM was advertising with, what was the relationship between IBM and these companies?
Good point. IBM was the, servers and back then laptops also.
Oh, yeah.
Infrastructure technology.
Gotcha.
With these kind of newer areas, digital in particular, we would partner with, solutions, other third-party businesses that basically built their platforms on top of our software and services.
Gotcha.
And
okay. So this is like
technology.
pre-cloud computing. You were just doing like the server management. Gotcha.
Yeah. Before cloud was really a thing, people actually purchased servers and had server farms. I used to be on my hands and knees cleaning up dust bunnies in the server farms, making sure that, serial numbers matched what they needed to. And it was really awesome. And throughout this time, I got really kind of exposure to startups and, their culture, their beliefs, how they operated, which, spending my time at a large company which was also awesome, was very different. And to kind of tie it back to Culinary Agents full circle, I spent my free time with my friends who were in hospitality, and I would hear them, complain about or doom scrolling Craigslist at 3:00 in the morning, looking for, side hustle or the next job. And, just frustrations from the business owners, drawing straws to see who was going to be on Craigslist duty that, next week and have to manage that on top of their daily, duties. And I was like, isn't there something better? Isn't there something like a LinkedIn meets Match.com for jobs? And, the answer was always no. And I had the idea 6 years before I started Culinary Agents to build this technology.
It's like interesting when you have the idea and it takes that long for it to come to fruition, because that happened to me as well. So now I understand what the insight was, but what was that time between you having the idea and then finally deciding, all right, screw it, I'm going to go do this. Was there one big thing that catalyzed you taking that leap, or was it just sort of bubbling up over time? Or
it was a combination of bubbling up and then, me giving myself the pep talk of there's just never going to be a good time. I was always like, oh, let me save a little bit more money. Let me, I just got a big promotion. Let me just ride this a little bit. One of the things that feeds into the hospitality career paths section of Culinary Agents is the idea of, I started in IBM in a very unconventional way. I left the company 13 years later as one of the youngest executives worldwide. And back in the day, it was a very kind of widely understood thing that you join these companies, you stay for 30 years, you retire, and, over the years, you follow certain paths, and that's just what happens, right? And so for me, because I didn't get in traditionally, I wasn't recruited from an Ivy League school. I got in kind of through the back door or side door. I forged my own path. I was very intentional about the jobs that I took, and made sure that I was getting what I wanted out of it, even though I was, wildly underpaid at the time because of the way that I came in. But, just really focusing on what job do I want next? Who has it? How can I learn from them? And how can I utilize what's available to me to really build my own career path within this giant company? As a result, I ended up mentoring and actually being the poster child for talking and motivating the younger folks that were coming into the company to show them, all the different resources and how they could manage their careers within this giant company and how great it was. And so there was this kind of thing that, I felt that was missing with my friends, quite frankly, who I was helping them write their resumes. I was writing their statements of works when they had an opportunity to do a one-off consulting, gig. And I was like, you need an agent, right? You need like a Jerry Maguire. You need somebody to, cheer on your behalf to make sure that you're not being taken advantage of, and then to make sure that they negotiate, what you're worth. And that didn't really exist either. And that's kind of how I initially came up with Culinary Agents, is be your own agent. How can we build the tools and enable people to represent themselves, to get the information they need, to connect with the employers, to find, side hustles and gigs and all these other things without having, by taking out all the kind of in between awkwardness of having to sell yourself and put yourself out there and brag about yourself and everything.
So when you were being so intentional about each of the jobs that you took along the way, did you have guidance? Was that your parents telling you, hey, make sure you think about this path? Or was it just did you just happen to realize that at a very young age that you need to be that intentional?
My mother passed when I was younger. So my dad...
How old were you when you were
10. Yeah. And so my dad, who immigrated as a traditional Asian father, had to really kind of readjust. And all of a sudden he had, two teenagers, or I was 10 and my brother was 13. And he had to really kind of set aside his his beliefs and his own pursuits for entrepreneurial pursuits. That, he was kind of living the American dream. He had his own company. He was doing well. And he had to just stop everything and basically, focus on us. And so for me, I always worked. I was the one that was the mall rat. I went from job to job simultaneously. I just wanted to get out there and get experience. So I've had this kind of independence and drive throughout my life. And, I'll be your number one cheerleader, but I'm, not the best at promoting myself. Isn't how it always works. For me, it was a combination of of survival of like, okay, how do you do this? And then, I also, and maybe when you're younger, you're more fearless. I very intentionally asked one of the most senior members of IBM to be my mentor. And I did what I felt was needed to keep that relationship. I was proactive. I updated them. I was extremely polite and respectful. I made it my thing to seek out what I wanted and ask for help. And I found time and time again, and that takes itself, even to this day, is that, when you ask for help or you let other people know your intentions, you'll be surprised because in general, especially in hospitality, a lot of people want to help each other. But if they don't know what you need help with or what you want, it makes it that much more difficult. So I'm always like, I was out there saying like, I'm not good in the area of sales. I really want to get into sales. And when I told enough people about that, and when the opportunity to be the relationship manager for Netflix and the territory came up, I got tapped on the shoulder and was like, do you want to do this? And that's how I've navigated my roles.
It's interesting. I was actually just talking about this like 2 weeks ago with a friend of mine who's the CEO of another company about just sort of mentorship and like asking for help. And one, I mean, I don't know how you knew that early on to like ask for that. I remember like, I wish I had known that when I was 20 and starting in kitchens and things like that. It was like finding a mentor and asking for help. But I think something that maybe gets left out, I'm curious what you think about this, because I'm hearing the way that you sort of went into IBM and like starting at the bottom and like sort of doing whatever you can to sort of move up. I feel like you do have to also like earn the help,
Yeah.
like, yes, ask for it, make sure you're very clear what you need, but then show like, hey, look, I'm like taking the things that you've taught me and taking action and showing that. And people want to help so much more when you do that. I'm curious if that's something that you like actively thought about, or clearly you did that in your work, but if you thought about when you were like finding mentors.
Yeah, that's so important. I actively do that. And at the time, I also was very aware and actively did the two-way street thing. Mentor, mentee, there's a lot of gray area, there's a lot of confusion, and there's a lot of just, I don't know, people think of mentors, you can ask somebody to be your mentor, but if you're a mentee, you have responsibilities as well. And I think what worked for my particular situation was that I was like a super hard worker, but I was also in this kind of emerging, exciting part of the company that my mentor was interested in. And he used to proactively tell me, every time we have these meetings, I actually learned something from you as well. And I always made sure I brought information to him that he would be interested in and he could use in his kind of talks at the higher level. He used to say like, I'm kind of far removed from clients, and, because he just doesn't have time for it, but when he would gain some insights or ask me specific questions, it would help him and it would round him out, and he would share that with me. So yes, as a mentee, your responsibility is to make your mentor, old school saying, like, make your mentor proud. You need to be, if you're asking for help and you want to be the best, in a certain area, or you want to learn more, you need to put the time, and you need to be proactive, and you need to show that you're taking that advice and you're putting it into practice, and then you're following up and closing the loop, right?
Yeah.
Because especially these days also, it's easy to ask somebody for time, or can I pick your brain? And, that kind of gets a little old as well, because then sometimes somebody picks your brain and then you never see or hear from them ever again. Other times it's, there's a lot of thought and relevancy that came with that request. And with that comes, that's how you build the relationship, right? You can have quick coffees, brain picking, but the relationship is built over time. And this particular person was my mentor for 13, or I would say at least 10 of my 13 years there.
Yeah. It's something I'm getting more excited about as I kind of like, I'm getting older, because I get so many emails from people asking questions or advice about things. And it just reminds me of like, oh, wow. Yeah, that's how I asked. And it really is, it's more on the mentee. It's like, it's up to you to like be very clear about what is it that you're actually trying to gain out of this. And it's on you to like figure out where you can, derive value from this relationship.
And send updates, right?
Because
I proactively sent the updates. I got with his assistant and put time on the calendar. It wasn't like he was like, hey, you have time to meet. I was just like, here's an update. If we didn't have time, I sent the update. I sent my thank yous. I showed appreciation. And then I did him proud by working really hard and doing great things for the company. And that was also motivating for me as well, right? I wanted to do those things.
Yeah, 100%. I see it also with, I mean, this is more maybe in the entrepreneurial space when you bring on like an advisor that's getting equity or something like that. And I've heard other founders just be like, maybe upset because they're not getting enough value out of this advisor. And that's on you, not on them. Like you chose for them to come on board. As long as you're very clear about like the things that you need and you make sure you ask the right questions and you follow up. It's not very often that like the person advising is the reason why you're not getting the value.
Right. 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 And I will say, one more thing about this is I talk about a lot, and I really love the idea of, I call virtual mentorship. And it's the idea of like, okay, a mentor-mentee relationship doesn't necessarily have to be like one-on-one. And, there's different ways to have a relationship. But in hospitality in particular, it gets challenging sometimes, whether it's physical or you don't work with this person, you don't know them, you don't meet them, et cetera. Our hospitality career paths, which is about over 500, I call virtual mentors. It's basically how they got to where they are and then advice they have for aspiring and existing and peers of, the hospitality industry. What's amazing about this is that you can derive value and advice from these folks who you admire or even people you may never have heard of, but their career path is very interesting or inspiring to you. And these are proof points. These are proof points and examples of like ways that you can take the foundational skills and your learnings from wherever you are in your career and take it in any direction, right? One of the beautiful things about this industry is that in each step of the way, you're learning a set of skills, whether they be technical or soft skills, and you can take them with you, whether or not you decide to stay in the industry or go into another part of the industry or leave the industry completely. And there's not that many industries where you can say that, actually.
Yeah. No, 100%. This show is brought to you by, you guessed it, Meez. Meez helps thousands of restaurants and food service businesses all over the world build profitable menus and scale their business successfully. If you're looking to organize your recipe IP and train your team to put out consistent product every day in less time than ever before, then Meez is just for you. And you can transform all those old Google Docs and Word docs and PDFs and spreadsheets and Google Sheets into dynamic, actionable recipes in Meez in lightning speed. Plus, stop all that manual work of processing invoices because Meez will digitize all your purchases automatically. And there's a built-in database of ingredient yields, prep yields, and unit of measure conversions for every ingredient, which means you're going to get laser-accurate food costs in a fraction of the time. Visit www.getmeez.com. That's GETMEEZ.com to learn more. And check out the show notes moving forward because we're going to be adding promotions and discount codes so that all of you lovely and brilliant Meez podcast listeners get a sweet deal on Meez. You know what, something I also really love nowadays is asynchronous help. So like if I need something, if I have a question or if I want to walk through something, I use Loom and I'll just like record myself asking these things or maybe showing screen, and then I can send it to somebody, and then I don't need to book time in the calendar. And I've raised capital this way, by the way, where like there's investors be like, hey, like send me all the information and like tell me all about this and on a Loom. And I've raised capital by like never meeting somebody. And just,
Amazing.
Sending these Looms back and forth. And I think I totally agree. This asynchronous, like support mentorship is like something that didn't exist before. It sounds like that's something that's part of what you're working on at Culinary Agents. Is that right?
Yeah, we don't have the actual kind of feedback that way. It's more of like one-way feedback. But yes, I mean, it's the idea of like, if you're looking for advice, inspiration, lessons learned, and examples of how people have done it, and you want to consume that information on your, when you have time and on whatever device you want, like we're here for you.
I love that.
And, that kind of feeds into this whole idea of, especially, pre-COVID. And then of course, during COVID, all the information in the press, everything about the industry, it kind of takes a negative skew, right? And for us, the whole thing was, how do we create tools to better support this amazing industry and the people, right? There are so many incredible stories. There's so many examples, and everyone, is basically spending their time and effort taking care of other people. So how can we give them better tools to take care of themselves, promote themselves, get better jobs, and then push the professional agenda, across the board? That's what we continue to strive for at Culinary Agents.
Well, let's talk about Culinary Agents because obviously it's evolved a bunch. What is it today? What are like all of the services that you are providing and who you're providing for?
Yeah. And this is our 12-year anniversary. So very excited.
Congratulations. It's amazing.
Thank you. Thank you. It's like, I would say different segments of the 12 years had its own excitements and challenges. What we are today is we are the go-to hiring platform for the hospitality industry. We have about 2 million users on the site, hospitality users, and about 48,000 businesses, fine dining and fast casual, food service, hotels of all shapes and sizes. And we were kind of the first, not kind of, we were the first before AI was a thing. We really focused on this matching, AI-driven matching algorithm to help talent discover employer brands and to help employers have better recruiting tools. And so, we have a full platform of job marketing and applicant tracking to support businesses, flexible based upon needs and season, et cetera. But we focus on the talent. Our mission is to help talent succeed in this industry, in their career. And you break that down, and how do you do that? Of course, you make it easy for them to find information about employers, about the industry, mentorship or just advice and inspiration. And then what does that look like beyond that, right? And we continue to do that, and that's what's really exciting and drives kind of us in this
It's awesome.
next
So
phase.
anybody looking for a job that come on, I didn't realize that you have an AI model that's like driving some of this. What are some of the heuristics that are used to sort of point a person in the direction of, business A versus business B in the model?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things without giving our trade secrets. I mean, we are set up, as a two-sided marketplace. So when people come in and they create their profiles, they're putting, their skills, their information, et cetera, based upon their resume. And then when businesses are posting jobs, they're doing something similar. So our algorithms really look at, percentage of matching, if you will, based upon the requirements from the business and what talent, what skills they have and what they're doing and what they want to do. And so, as you can imagine, that continues to evolve, and it gets quite exciting on the back end. But even some basic discovery tools to help talent was if they're looking at a particular job, we tee up other opportunities in the area that are similar that might fit their needs. And so it ends up being a tool that really makes people feel welcome, right? And I think that's important. We design it specifically so that if you're a dishwasher, a busser, an executive chef, a general manager, we're speaking your language. The tools are relevant. You're filtering jobs by Michelin awards, if that's what you're looking for, or you just want to find something within a 3-block radius of where you live, or something closest to the train or has good transportation. So, I think that's really important in general, and why we're so proud to create this tool specifically for hospitality is that there's different needs and nuances for both sides, from both talent and businesses.
Yeah, I love that. And is it sort of an extension of what a individual like recruiter would do? Are you doing recruiting, on a one-to-one basis in addition to this sort of like aggregate marketplace? Or is it primarily this marketplace, this two-sided marketplace?
We are primarily the technology platform. We do have a lot of recruiters, both independent recruiters and also in-house recruiters who use our platform to find the talent they need and then hire them. And that's really our goal, is to enable. Right? We're enabling whether you are the owner, operator, and you have a small mom and pop, or your needs are not too complicated. We've got everything for you, and it's cost efficient, or you have a whole suite of tools for free. It's really important for us to offer value first and offer a lot of it for the hardworking businesses and the hardworking people in this industry, and we continue to do that as part of the core of our development.
It's awesome. Well, I read, I don't know where I read this. I think I actually read it on Culinary Agents, a quote that you had. It's generally starting and growing a business doesn't get easier. It gets harder and it evolves, which is so true, right? Things don't ever get easier. They just get a different kind of hard. I couldn't agree more, but you're now 12 years in. What's gotten harder over time for you? And like, how has the business sort of like changed in significant ways since day one?
I would say, 12 years in, it has been so incredible to make it to this point, starting out as, I would say, a traditional tech startup, fundraising and how challenging that was back in 2012. And I'd say fundraising in general is difficult across the board, but fundraising as a single female non-technical founder was extremely difficult. And quite frankly, my 13 years of IBM experience worked against me in a lot of cases because people thought I didn't have the grit or I was institutionalized. I've had these words said directly to me, and that just fueled me more. I was like, oh, this is happening. I cashed out my 401k and I was like, we're in. But so in the beginning couple of years, the challenge was, you're in the thick of the tech startup fundraising engine and all of that excitement as well, and that competition. So you're building from scratch, you're trying to figure it out, you're trying to please all the audiences, and you're trying to do it in a scrappy, bootstrapped way. And then the second phase, as you kind of get the business underway, you've got clients. I was very fortunate to, even before funding, secure a lot of amazing clients that just understood that there was a need for this and was willing to use it and give feedback. And we committed to take that feedback and put it into the product so that, they had a hand in really making this relevant tool for them and for the industry. So the first couple of years, the challenge was always fundraising. Right? Once you raise the money, it's like, okay, how do you raise the next round? And you reach a point where you kind of hit a fork in the road and you're like, what does raising the next round mean to us in a positive and a negative way? And once you kind of take a step back a little bit, you realize, the best way to move forward and build the company and the products that you want to do what you want to do is to own your own destiny, control your own destiny. And how do you become an actual business that can actually fund yourself and build and prioritize what you want to prioritize because that's what your customer wants because they're asking for it, right? And to have that level of freedom and autonomy is so liberating, and it's really incredible. So then you enter kind of the next phase. Once you reach the point where you're like, I don't depend on outside capital in order to survive, you can think about things a little differently. So the next challenge is, me in general, like I want to do everything right now, all at once, and help everybody, right? And so the challenge is prioritization. Like, how do you take all the things you want to do and then put it into a logical roadmap, right? If you're talking about product development, there is just logical sequencing, and then agreeing on how to, what's more important than what, and then building out the product and company and services, as you can, right? To make sure you still have that autonomy. So, that's kind of where we are now. Is my challenge is like I can't keep my excitement in. I know that sounds cheesy, but we have a huge thing that we're working on that we're very excited on that we'll be releasing in the next couple of months here. That kind of takes us into the next phase.
So what's the timing? So it sounds like you were raising capital, maybe venture capital for a while, and then at some point it's like, okay, we're gonna get to profitability. How far into the business was it that you decided, okay, we're gonna stop raising capital and we're gonna get profitable?
Yeah, well, we raised Series A in 2015, and that was the last time we took capital.
Wow. Good for you.
So it was, we launched international as part of the agreement with our Series A lead, and that was a great learning experience. And we decided that the focus was the U.S. It is the U.S. There's still so much opportunity here. There's 500,000 or so independent restaurants and cafes and bars in the United States, and we want everyone to use our free hiring tools, right? We built it for them. How do we get that out there so that people can save some effort and time and headache potentially, and so they can focus on, their business and other things.
First of all, that's amazing. Congratulations that you haven't raised in over 10 years. It's funny, I'm having this conversation right now. We raised a Series A couple of years ago and we're raising a little more cash now, but like that's the conversation I'm thinking about is that, that path to profitability, irrespective of raising more capital, just like not having to rely on, outside capital anymore.
Yeah. It really is a game changer.
Yeah. I mean, there's no way around the unfortunate, bias that you have to make some decisions relative to how it will impact the next round of funding, which is sometimes good for the customer and sometimes not necessarily, right? It's like, you have to grow at a certain pace if you're a venture-backed business, and it can kind of like change your decision matrix in a way that isn't necessarily the best thing for the business long term, which is a tough scenario. So it's really commendable that you did that. I was actually looking at Crunchbase while you were saying that to see. We have some similar investors, we have some similar investors. It's amazing. And the fact that you're now like 10 years in is huge. I am curious, you said you're working on these new products. Like, what are you excited about? What, like, if you give any more information about like what is coming up, and also like what's your day to day like now, right? This is, you're over a decade in. Like what's a typical like day or week in the life of Alice?
My day to day. Well, I would say one of the things that we intentionally did is keep a small but mighty team. I have the most amazing team, full stop. That's important on several different levels. We're really thoughtful about resource planning. We're really thoughtful about what we really need. And then taking a look at the existing team and see, is this an opportunity for someone, or does somebody have capacity, or somebody excited about this? And that really has served us well in many different ways. But my day to day is kind of split into a couple of different categories. I still am heavily involved in all the internal product development, testing, QA. I want to touch everything. I really sweat the small stuff, client feedback, wish list items, et cetera. And, making sure that myself and my co-founders are on the same page because they run respective units that drive the rest of the business. I really focus on clients. I have a whole section of my day that's either following up, circling back, checking in, proactively doing something for customers. Our client success team is, I'd say everyone's important, but it's a really key part of how we operate. We're a very proactive client success team. We don't have a sales team. I spend my day to day being that and being the relationship manager for a lot of things. So problem solving, getting into the weeds of stuff, and really looking at, I try to block off some time every day to just brainstorm. Like I'm an ideas person. I get excited about stuff. I like to throw wild ideas out there to see, how the team will react sometimes, just to be like, could we? Like, why couldn't we? Let's try this, and those are kind of luxuries that I think I get to have because I have such an awesome team to take care of, a lot of the stuff that I used to have to, they used to keep me up all night, answering help tickets at 2, 3, 4, 5 in the morning was my day for many, many years.
How big is the team?
We are 16.
Oh man,
full time here in the U.S. in New York. Yeah.
Gotcha. And you got some offshore folks as well.
Yeah, to help with some data stuff.
Yeah, same.
But yeah, we just keep it lean and grow as needed.
What do you like most? Like, what keeps you up at night right now? Other than
besides my toddler,
Logan. Yeah.
That's one of the best changes. As far as business evolution and what keeps me up at night is very different now than what keeps me up at night, what kept me up at night earlier on. I almost feel guilty a little bit by saying like, I sleep great at night, like, we, and this is largely due to the way we have been operating. What keeps me up is more like the excitement of the stuff that's coming up. I always want to do more quicker. So I feel like that's both my superpower as well as my Achilles heel, because I'm always like, okay, come on. Even though I very well know that things take time to develop and I know the process and I know the framework, that still doesn't stop me from asking like, okay, can we do it a little faster? Like, can we, bring it up a little bit? And so those are the things that, really get me excited and
well, I'm
doesn't
jealous.
Quite keep me up, but yeah, you'll get there. You're getting there.
Amazing.
You are.
It's funny how different running I ran restaurants my whole life, and running tech companies is such a different beast, especially a venture-backed one. I mean, by the way, it's amazing. I love it. Like, it's so much fun, and moving fast is really fun. But yeah, there's a lot of things that keep me up. Well, I wouldn't mind getting, if you're okay with it, and I don't even know if this is like in your purview, but I have to assume it kind of is, which is like hiring, right? And sort of tactics around hiring. Because I've been digging down, like going down this rabbit hole of hiring and job descriptions. And I don't know if you ever read Who by Jeff Smart and what's his name? Randy Street. There's like this A method of hiring. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I haven't read that, but I know what you're talking
Anyways, it's a really cool, we use it like for when we're hiring, but like you mentioned in Culinary Agents, like things that you look for in a new hire, things like positive attitude and willingness to learn, problem solving, things like that, collaborative, trust came up a lot, I believe. But like, I'm curious, like if you have like systems or processes or tools or like methodologies that you use yourself, or maybe more so like to sort of like share with your customers of like, here's how we think you should measure and quantify and find the things that you want out of an employee.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, the answer to this somewhat depends on, the position and the type of what you're hiring for, et cetera. I think in general, one method that we typically enjoy is we do a scorecarding method for our hires because we usually have multiple people who are part of the process. And it's interesting. One thing that I think is important is getting on the same page with the leadership or whoever is going to be involved in the hiring process on what are you looking for? Right? And once you have a handful of things, right? These are the technical skills. These are the soft skills. What would be a cultural fit for what you're looking for, or what are specific skills that are a current gap that you must fill with this hire, right? And once you have that agreement, and then you go your separate ways and have your interviews or you evaluate, and everybody scores independently, it's a really interesting and quite thoughtful conversation when you come together and you see, how or why people thought, a certain category was stronger or weaker, et cetera. And typically, if you have a couple of different candidates and you scorecard them all, you see who has the higher score and why. It makes the conversation a little bit more, the process more organized and focused on, what we agreed upon was the most important and what clearly or who clearly is the person that's the best fit.
Yep. Yeah, I'm a huge believer in the scorecard. It's part of that payment that I was talking about. We do a similar thing. We weight each of the attributes depending on the role of if these are the 10 attributes we're looking for, like this one's weighted heavier than this one, and then we do sort of like a layered scale of stack ranking. Is there anything like sort of like non-contrarian or something novel that you've like seen, or patterns that you've seen? They're like, people should know this when they're hiring that might not necessarily be looking at typically.
Yeah. It's one thing that I really emphasize that is one of those kind of obvious, not so obvious things, and more so in the past couple of years, is employer branding. Like employer brand has been something that we've been talking about for, almost since the beginning that we started. And now I think it's more important than ever because there's more tools and information out there for potential candidates to do research or to follow. And over time, you should know that you're kind of always hiring, right? Mm-hmm. Whatever you're putting out there, whether it's social media, the organizations you support, the beliefs, what your leadership is saying, these are all kind of little pieces that make up a picture of what you might be like, not just as a destination to dine or to have, to enjoy yourself, but also to work, giving thought and intention to what are you putting out there and what is your culture and what do you agree on as being, your focus, your mission, et cetera, and making sure those points are permeated through your job descriptions, through, what you're putting out there or on your employer page or whatever, making it easy for talent to apply to your jobs. I mean, that's something that we found really on a regular basis. It's like, well, if you're hiring, but nobody knows how to actually apply or to send you a resume or what you require from them to include in that message, sending an email to an info@box when you want to work there is not, it doesn't feel good on the candidate side either. So it's thinking about this experience of what you're putting out there and how you want to engage with your potential candidate, because that's the first relationship point, is them reading what your requirement is or potentially doing some research on social channels or your website to learn a little bit about you. And then them deciding, okay, do I want to work here? Right? What's being said about them. And that is something that we always emphasize is should be part of like the early planning, especially, we're talking about fall hiring season now. Like all employers should be giving some thought to this and doing a little housekeeping cleanup across their job descriptions, their, what they're putting out there on their website, making sure that the jobs are easily found on your website. We have free career pages. There's so many free things. Please take advantage of them and let us know how we can help. I think all the little pieces, they fit together and they are meaningful.
Yeah. We'll make sure to put that in the show notes as well, the links there. And by the way, I totally agree. Like it's a two-way sale. You have to also sell them on why they should come work here. I want to talk about job descriptions for a second because, and by the way, this is an HR nightmare, but like I hate job descriptions. And in a perfect world, and I actually do this somewhat, with what we do. And again, there's some differences with like, kitchens versus other types of roles, but like, I just don't like the idea of putting duties into a job description. I like, what is the result that we're looking for? What are like the rules of engagement? Here's our first principles. Here's our values. Like, here's our non-negotiables. And that's it, because the duties will change, but the result is what you're looking for. And I find that like, well, every time I would write a job description, I'm like, okay, what am I missing? What things do I want them to be able to do that if I don't put in here, they're not going to do? And I'm like, you're always going to forget things. And then there's this list of here's the things that you're supposed to do. But none of that really matters. In my mind, it's like you're creating this sort of task-driven organization as opposed to a result-driven. It's like, hey, I want you to increase customer count by 50% over the next 2 years. That's your, that's your role. And here's how we operate as a company, what we believe in, and, have at it. But I'm curious, like, your thoughts on that, because I'm sure sometimes, especially from an HR perspective, it's important, but like, has that changed over the years for you guys? Or how do you think about job descriptions in that regard?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you, and I totally get that. I think it's always good to put like, the blanket statement that basically says like, you're not limited to these things, but and like, all the other positive things that entice people to want to apply to your jobs. There are specific reasons why you would want to put your duties there. Some of it could be legal. I think these days, depending on the state, depending on the city, depending on the requirements, just to be safe, setting expectations, I think is more of the point.
Yeah.
Is that these are the tasks and responsibilities. I think it's also important because it kind of shows, I don't like the word transparency because then it implies that you're not transparent, but it does lay out there like, hey, this is what's going to be asked of you. And I think it's fair to say to the person who is looking at what is going to be asked of them to set that expectation. Like, you will need to do these duties. Whether or not that individual, one of the things that we really encourage talent to do, and we're building more tools to help them here, is better understand the skills and requirements of the job and from that particular employer, and then do a self-assessment. Like, do you really have all those skills, right?
Yeah.
And you can apply to the jobs even if you don't have those skills. But how do you set the expectation for yourself as well as for the potential employer that these are areas that you're working on, or you have some experience but not potentially at the level that they require, et cetera, right? Because you're trying to get the conversation going and you want to start that relationship with as much information and honesty as you can.
Right? Yeah, I think, look, it's almost like, here's some examples of things that we're going to expect you to do.
Right.
But especially today, and again, this is not necessarily the case in kitchens, but things are changing so fast. Like, if you had a job that you had a job description for from a year and a half ago, it would say nothing about how to leverage, language models to do your job faster. And before that, it would have said nothing about like, hey, you should probably learn like some, spreadsheet formulas because it's going to, but like as technology evolves and as innovations evolve, you sort of like can start to like apply these things to make yourself better at this, at what you do. And I find that like that's for me, like they become so limiting. It's like, well, it didn't say in my job that I should, use GPT to come up with these things. No, it didn't. But it would be a lot better if you did. Yeah, I don't know. It's really tough. I think, I guess it's the language you use,
I would think also, I guess my comments there would be, think of the job description as the high level.
Directional.
The high level, right? Directional, exactly. This is what we're looking for. The details, right? If you're hiring somebody who is, is a critical thinker, is flexible, all those other things, problem solver, then hopefully, if they're the right fit, you can kind of guide them with some of those more detailed things. But I get it. It's not, there's not a direct, like, perfect way to address some of these things. And I think that's one of the challenges, best practices. But then there's also encouragement that the employer, has their own unique characteristics shine through, right? So you put the boring, but then how do you put a little bit of pizzazz that says like, oh, this is a mission-driven company. These are the organizations they support. They have, internal training programs that, I really want to learn more about or I want to be a part of. They say that they, put employees first, and I actually know they do because there's examples of that. And I've talked to my friends that work there, right?
Yeah.
So all these things happen, right? And employers can really use that to their advantage.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'll stop asking questions about that.
Yeah, no, hey, anytime.
Well, I've been asking this more recently, off and on, and it's more, there's a purpose to it, I promise. But what makes you really angry? Like blood boiling angry?
When people are rude to service workers, I see red immediately. I can't even help myself. Like I actually think I've been told my face turns red right away too. And specifically like servers and people in that type of role. I don't know if it's because I spent so many years doing a lot of that stuff, but I just think there's no need for that. And I just feel like it's it's just, people have bad days, but if you are, really rude or disrespectful to your server, that really,
why do you think it
really
makes you,
gets to me.
see, of course, nobody should do that. That's terrible. But why do you think that specifically is the person that comes to mind? Is like that makes you like, so
I
angry?
just, there's this natural kind of stigma that comes with, working in the industry and service in particular. And that has changed so much over the years where, we push the professional agenda. We show how people progress in their careers. And it's such a noble profession that I think part of me gets upset because the person who's receiving it 9 out of 10 times, they take it. They take it. It's not like they're going to retaliate, and maybe they do, but it's this like unfair exchange and this entitlement of like, you are serving me, that just gets me very like, you're, I don't know. It hits all the wrong like buttons for me.
Yeah, I feel you. Yeah, that's like
I think I'm getting red just thinking about it, actually.
Well, so the other question that I had asked, that we went to sort of your day to day, but what's next? You have a million things you're thinking about, but like, what's what's on the horizon for you and for Culinary Agents?
Yeah, I'm so excited. We have, we're the go-to hiring platform. We want to be the go-to career hub. And we still have so many businesses that we need to get our free tools in front of. And I think that's something that we haven't been able to prioritize over the years because we've been so focused on, getting the product suite rounded out, is letting people know that it exists, right? We need to eat our own cooking, basically, and start shouting it from the rooftops. We're so excited to offer all these great free tools to help businesses and talent. And we are, focusing on getting that message out.
Nice. Well, everybody should know about it. And we will make sure that everybody has the link. Yeah. CulinaryAgents.com, I'm assuming, right?
Yes.
I don't remember the URL. I just Google it every time. Well, I've used it many times. It's an awesome platform. And
thank you.
I'm just glad that we had a chance to spend more time getting to know each other. And I love what you built. And I'm just, congratulations on how far it's come. And it seems like you're only getting started. So,
yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
And same to you. I mean, I feel like this is the beginning of more conversations offline, off recording.
Oh, yeah. I already have a million ideas. Don't worry.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning into the Mies podcast. The music from the show is a remix of the song Art Mirror by an old friend, hip-hop artist, Fresh Daily. For show notes and more, visit getmees.com/podcast. That's GETMEEZ.com/podcast. If you enjoyed the show, I'd love it if you can share it with fellow entrepreneurs and culinary pros, and give us a 5-star rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. Keep innovating, don't settle, make today a little bit better than yesterday, and remember, it's impossible for us to learn what we think we already know. See you next time.